The year is 2019. A strapping young lad walks into a game store with his friend, and both picked up used copies of Dark Souls 3. We heard tales of Dark Souls and its fabled ball-crushing difficulty, and we decided to test our mettle. We'd beaten Halo Reach on Legendary, so how hard could it be? We then proceeded to get our fade thoroughly ran by the tutorial boss for several hours. Death after death we persisted, until finally we claimed our righteous victory. Against the first boss. I made it to Firelink Shrine, placed the coiled sword, and what laid ahead of me was a journey that would fundamentally consume me. I love Dark Souls 3 so much. I still have my physical copy, and I've played through it a minimum of 11 times with 280 hours in game. For the longest time, this game has meant so much to me, delivering a memorable and engaging experience that served as my entry into the world of FromSoft. Bloodborne, Sekiro, Elden Ring, all amazing in their own right, but among them all, Dark Souls 3 reigned supreme, serving as what I considered the epitome of FromSoft's game design. Formidable, hulking bosses that trap you in a ballet of battle, exchanging blows bathed in blood, a powerful soundtrack to electrify each new encounter, a world on the verge of collapse, grasping at the faded embers of hope in desperation to save what little remains, and a challenge fitting for such a titanic task. This game will break you, make you stronger, then break you again. I think if you are new to Dark Souls or FromSoft's games, this is the one to start with. I find it to be accessible in ways the other games may not be without diluting yourself of the genuine Souls experience. Truly a once-in-a-lifetime journey, and my favorite game of all time. Then I played Dark Souls 1. I played Dark Souls Remastered for the first time this year, and I want to hit myself with a crowbar for waiting so long. Despite a rocky start, I found my footing and embarked on a journey that challenged everything I thought I knew. After 31 hours, I rolled credits on Dark Souls 1, and I was flooded with feelings of awe and confusion. This game I had just completed was significantly better than what I had considered the best game of all time. How was it possible? Was I wrong this whole time? Why is Dark Souls 2 so fucking bad? Granted, after playing DS3 a dozen times, I was excited for a new Dark Souls I had never experienced before, but in that first playthrough, everything I thought I knew about Dark Souls was slowly stripped away. It's a strange feeling seeing something you held in such high regard be surpassed in almost every way, like I was almost believing in a lie. But it's not a lie. I would say on an objective standard, Dark Souls 3 is a good game. Great even. But having finished Dark Souls 1, I feel like I can't go back. The one thing DS1 is unmatched in is exploration. Interconnected zones and shortcuts force you as the player to engage with the environments by mapping out where you are and the optimal route to get where you need to go. Seeing how areas transition and loop back into each other is impressive to this day. It's seriously like watching a magic trick, and this is complemented by the lack of fast travel in the first half of the game. Mostly because you genuinely don't need it. You can go from Ash Lake to Tomb of the Giants all by foot. But this does come at a small price of some pretty dreadful runbacks. I must have done the Depths runback 1,000 goddamn times. But the interconnectivity goes a long way in making the world feel so cohesive and intentional. It's kinda hard to believe that FromSoft peaked so early with their level design, which I know may be blasphemous in the name of our Lord Elden Ring. The world of Elden Ring on a technical level is miles more impressive, but a lot of the time it's just wide open fields meant for you to run through on torrent, with smaller, more dense areas to explore like Stormvale Castle, Raya Lucaria, Royal Capital, and Farum Azula, which are really great areas, but in Dark Souls every single area is dense and varied, with diverging and interweaving paths. Exploring an area is always rewarding. You never have a reason not to follow a splitting path. Sure, you might be unpleasantly touched by some dudes in hoods along the way, but think of the adventure! But it isn't just a fun design choice. DS1 demands its players be able to traverse this map, being the key to progression. Areas like the Great Hollow and painted world of Ariamis are so well hidden, most players probably missed it in their first playthrough, so finding it feels like a genuine reward. Like the devs put it there only for those who are willing to look for it, and didn't care if most players never saw it. Moving around the world is literally half the fun in this game, and if you know where you're going, you can skip large parts of areas, making it the most hindsight 2020 20 of any FromSoft game. But going back to DS3, it just feels like a straight fucking line the entire game. You start in the Cemetery of Ash and walk all the way straight to Lothric Castle. Yes, there is an occasional fork in the road, but once you've run through the main path of an area, there's not much else to do. Now, I will say again, I have played this game 11 times. I know my way around, but there's no real reason to explore an area beyond grabbing stuff along the main path, typically being the more important stuff like soul, Estus shards, or undead bone fragments. There are hidden areas like Archdragon Peak and Untended Graves, and they're good, but one is just go here to teleport to a new area, and the other is just the tutorial area with the lights turned off. While DS3 does have plenty of shortcuts, they don't really serve to connect to any other paths or areas. They only serve to move you further along the pre-established path, like Grand Archives and Irithyll. Placing the Bells of Awakening on two opposing ends of the map demands exploration to progress. Rather than just taking a walking tour, you actually have to look for your objective. The only instance I can think of where progression is halted due to lack of exploring is the small doll from Deacons needed to enter Irithyll. And I mean, let's be real, you'll end up at Deacons anyway, so. DS1 places its objectives all over the map. And similar to Resident Evil's design, where you typically find the locked door before you find the key. But all this is just making me think, why didn't they just do it again? The map's design is basically what the entire game revolves around. And when thinking about what sets Dark Souls 1 apart from the other FromSoft titles, the level design is immediately what comes to mind. So why would you not repeat that in DS3? The Estus system of DS1 adds a level of strategy that isn't really seen in any FromSoft game after. Offering humanity to a bonfire allows you to gain more Estus from resting at it. Humanity being a finite item means you need to choose which fires to level up based on location and how much you'll revisit. Maybe it's close to a boss you're struggling against and you choose to sacrifice some humanity in order to gain an advantage. There's actually a lot you can do with bonfires in this game. Level up, upgrade weapons and armor, access storage, kindle, reverse hollowing, making bonfires feel like useful places of rest. And in DS3, they're kind of just fast travel points. I guess in theory, there's nothing wrong with warping from bonfires. It just makes progression feel sort of trivial. For example, near the dilapidated bridge, there's a shortcut that is unlocked by reaching the other end of the path. But there's zero reason to unlock it when the Road of Sacrifice's bonfire is just a little further ahead, allowing easier and instant access between the 2 points. It's an actual inconvenience to unlock, and I skip it in every playthrough. And it's a real problem if you're skipping shortcuts in a Dark Souls game. It's not like you'll be revisiting this area, so there's no use for it at all. DS1 bonfires did serve as a checkpoint, but when you're deep in an area like Depths or Blighttown, there's no escaping with a bonfire. You are in that shit. Making the discovery of a bonfire or shortcut literally game-changing, since you can adjust your route around it. This could be seen as an inconvenience, but it adds more risk to your journey, and makes you plan and prepare before deciding where to go and what to do. The introduction of fast travel in the latter half of DS1 is mostly just a convenience for tying up the loose threads to beat the game, but only giving it to you halfway through the game makes it feel more earned and like you've unlocked something worth all the punishment you've been through. And admittedly, you do kinda need it, because at that point in the game you've just been to so many different places, and will basically be going to all 4 corners of the map for the Lord Souls. But in some areas warping is restricted, making it harder to abuse. But I know in DS3 you need to be able to warp back to Firelink to level up and I don't know, jerk your shit or whatever. But just let us level up at the bonfire like before. It feels like they created a solution to a problem they didn't really have. But in all fairness, this is a symptom of Dark Souls 2. Look, the runbacks do suck, but it's kind of the quintessential Souls experience. Repetition through failure, hard but fair. And with fast travel, you're sort of depriving yourself of that experience. I know it might sound like some weird cope, but just blipping anywhere you please just isn't as fun, and really disrupts the flow of progression. DS3's progression is quite railroaded, with a pretty natural order of events. In interviews, Miyazaki and the dev team talked about making DS3 a more accessible and curated experience. With linear progression, they were able to better dictate the difficulty curve by knowing where the player would be at any given point in the game. And honestly, this is a major factor of why I loved the game so much in the first place. Just something you can boot up, run through in a few hours, and leave fully satisfied and accomplished. A compact, curated, well-designed streamlined experience. And ultimately, this approach sort of alienated the original player base in favor of appealing to a broader audience, devoting a little too much to quality of life improvements for the convenience of new players. And yeah, I see it. In DS1, you're free to tackle most things in any order you want. If you wanted, you could kill Quelaag before you fight Bell Gargoyles. And for those who have only played DS3, it's like killing Wolnir before Vort. But with no initially clear path, it's totally possible to wander into the graveyard, get murdered by skeletons, and never touch the game again. But it also lets you curate your own experience. You come across a boss you're struggling to beat, go somewhere else, get stronger, and come back, making it less likely for you to get stuck when there isn't just one path forward. Okay, can we talk vibes? I want to talk about the vibes. It's no mystery Dark Souls has been creatively borrowing from Berserk since day one, and I love Berserk, so I'm all over that. Lordran is no doubt a gnarly place, full of dying gods and withering heroes, but there is still some level of beauty and serenity. Dark Souls 1's superior visual style feels like a real fantasy world with a grim sense of whimsy and wonder, almost juxtaposing the title. Cut to DS3 and it kind of feels like someone who hasn't played Dark Souls thinks Dark Souls is like. Everything is so dark and dramatic, the color palette is so muddy and bleak, everything is destroyed and rotting, and Sauron is here. Even the hollows go from undead zombies to boring gray husks. It makes sense for what's happening in this story. It's the capital A apocalypse and or the end of time. They removed all the fantastical elements of DS1 and went all in on dark fantasy. And in a lot of areas it looks like Bloodborne with the Dark Souls sepia filter. But honestly, to each their own on this one. I kind of feel like these are two valid approaches to this world that succeed in what they're going for. I just think the DS1 approach feels more interesting and alive. People complain about the nostalgia bait in DS3, but even after playing DS1 I don't really care. To me it ties into the overall tone of the game, watching fragments of the world you once knew rot away into darkness. It's in the same universe, so it's not really that unexpected. It can be a lot at times, but it maintains cohesion between the games. But with all of this said, I think it's time we finally talk about So let's start with the bosses, because I think that's the one thing people unanimously agree Dark Souls 3 does better. DS3's bosses are frankly just more fun to fight. The satisfaction of perfectly rolling through a boss's string of attacks still hits harder than most drugs. From Software's boss design has generally gotten better over the years, so this isn't much of a surprise. They force the player to memorize attacks, learn dodge windows, and adapt to the rhythm of combat. But if I can give one complaint, they all sort of boil down to a big guy with a big weapon in a squarish room, leaving some fights feeling kind of samey. But DS1 still has some really great bosses of its own. Ornstein and Smough, Artorias, Bed of Chaos.
Just kidding, it's trash.
My main problem with DS1's bosses is they're kinda too easy. After riding the DS3 roller coaster a dozen times, I can pretty handily beat any of the bosses first try. Yes, even Nameless King, praise me for I am fucking goated. But on my very first DS1 playthrough, after ONS, I was spanking basically every boss after. I struggled with some of the DLC bosses, and Gwyn killed me once, but it was nothing like throwing myself at Dragon Slayer armor for hours at a time. DS1 bosses are slower, have fewer moves, and are less reactive, and I don't think anyone would really argue against that, unless they're just like a crazy shooter for Gaping Dragon for some reason. You could say that DS1's bosses are more gimmicky, and that's partially true. Aside from Bed of Chaos, the gimmicks lean more into game mechanics rather than picking up this sword you'll never use again to chump one of the main bosses of the game. Capra Demon, Ornstein and Smough, Gravelord Nito, Bell Gargoyles are all unfair fights. On paper the gimmick is there's more than one guy, but they teach you to use the arena to your advantage and pressure the player by making them fight on the back foot. This game is an upward battle. The odds are stacked against you, and these fights are a physical manifestation of that. When it comes to final bosses, Soul of Cinder is undeniably superior. Sadly, Gwyn is such a wet fart of a final boss, even without parrying. I mean, he's fine, he just needed a second phase or something. It was pretty underwhelming. But Soul of Cinder is not only the best boss in that game, but probably the whole Dark Souls series. But while DS3 has better bosses, the combat feels like such a departure from the original DS1 style. DS1's style is more push and pull, hang back, bait out attacks, punish. In DS3, it's just, I'm gonna fucking get you. You just move and attack so much faster, and as a result, combat feels softer and lacks impact outside of the greatswords. Leaning into the more aggressive approach, and embracing the greed is good style of combat. And if I'm being real, it's essentially Bloodborne. And like, yeah, no shit, it came out after Bloodborne. Of course it's gonna be similar, jackass. 1, ouch, and 2, Dark Souls combat is heavy and methodical. Most of the time in the fight you're looking for an opportunity to swing, landing a massive satisfying hit. Thus is the creed of my house Claymore. But DS1 does have its rough edges, with some animations being too long, disrupting the flow of combat, and stamina regen is a little slow, but that's kind of a non-issue because you're just gonna equip the Grass Crest shield. No moving during Estus sucks, and Torch Hollows should be a felony, but it's not enough to bring the combat down substantially. I mean, DS3's combat is kinda better overall. Like, this game plays like a dream and is probably my favorite combat in any FromSoft title. They both share the same roots but fall under two different styles of combat. And while DS3 in every technical aspect is more polished and refined, I can't help but love Dark Souls with all of its flaws. On an objective standard, I think it is a better game and the perfect encapsulation of everything Dark Souls is. So by virtue, would this mean that DS1 is my new favorite game of all time? Well... So this is where things start to get dicey as we move out of the realm of facts and logic and into the treacherous waters of feelings. I know in my heart DS1 is a better game, but I don't think I have the same connection to it. People say your first FromSoft game is usually your favorite, and I guess there's some truth to that. I know it's cheesy, but like, can't I just love them both? I don't really mean for this to be a fake out, centrist, I see both sides ass ending, but I'm trying to bring this whole thing together. It's called storytelling. Both carry themes of endurance and determination, and a lot of people have found a sense of motivation and purpose from these games. There is no life system, so the only way you lose Dark Souls is when you give up. Despite insurmountable odds and the absolute dread that awaits you, you have to keep pushing, keep moving forward. Don't lose your purpose. Don't you dare go hollow. Until eventually you conquer your challenge and all of that struggle is behind you. As of writing this script, I'm coming off of 2 back-to-back playthroughs of these games. They both have their strengths and weaknesses, but as 2 pieces of media, they kind of complement each other. After all, it is the beginning and the end, without that weird middle part. Let me put it like this. If I was an astronaut being dangled in front of a black hole with the last remaining copies of Dark Souls 1 and 3 in both hands, and I had to let one go, it would probably be Dark Souls 3, but it would be for the sake of humanity and I wouldn't be happy about it. I've spent so much time with DS3 and it means so much to me, but if I played DS1, who's to say I wouldn't have the same connection to it? This video was inspired by the revelation I felt after completing Dark Souls 1. You can endlessly compare these games, but it just comes down to your individual experience. For me, if Dark Souls 3 is number 1, then Dark Souls 1 is like 1.5, just so barely behind it. I hope I did an okay job explaining my complex feelings about these games, and maybe some of it was good and maybe you resonated with it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on these games, if you agree, disagree, and which one you think is personally better. Or maybe you're a based individual and Sekiro is your favorite, in which case respect. So I think I can say while DS3 may still be my favorite game of all time, it will never give me an experience quite like Dark Souls 1, and I am grateful for every moment I have spent in the world of Dark Souls. Except for Dark Souls 2. Sorry, that game is a piece of shit.
I'm ghost riding the whip. Crazy taxi.
And as the sun rises, so do I return with a new video. I just quickly wanted to shout out this video by KRZ, or Kurz, not really sure how you say that. It's about the Capra Demon, and it actually really changed my perspective when I was starting Dark Souls 1, and yeah, I just wanted to show that some love. Also, shout out to the guy who says,
useless facts about Dark Souls.
Can't remember his name, but I love those videos. It's currently 2 a.m., pulled a late nighter editing this one, so I hope you enjoyed it. Next video will most likely be Metal Gear, unless I change my mind. Anyways, good night.